I never thought someone could make me feel like a guest in my own home without ever raising their voice. At
Yeah.
68, my life had become comfortably predictable. I liked it that way. My kitchen wasn't fashionable. The cabinets were older than some marriages. The spice rack sat exactly where it had sat for 20 years. The rose garden behind the house had taken even longer. 30 years of pruning, experimenting, failing, and starting over had turned a patch of soil into something that felt almost like a diary. Then Clara arrived. She was my daughter-in-law's older sister, recently divorced and temporarily staying nearby. At first, she seemed energetic, helpful, eager to be involved. The comments started small. "You'd save so much time if you organized this differently. You know, most people don't arrange kitchens like this anymore. Those roses look beautiful, but the layout feels a little crowded. Nothing openly rude, nothing dramatic." Yet every observation carried the same assumption. Something was wrong and she knew how to fix it. I laughed most of it off. But over the following months, Clara stopped making suggestions and started making decisions. One afternoon, I returned from shopping to find several shelves reorganized. Another day, she had moved containers from one side of the kitchen to the other. When I mentioned it, she smiled. I was just helping. The word helping became difficult for me to hear. The garden came next. That hurt more. She talked endlessly about modern landscaping, clean lines, simpler arrangements, less clutter. I remember standing by a row of roses I had planted after my husband died. She called them clutter. I didn't argue, partly because I disliked conflict, partly because I kept wondering if age was making me resistant to change. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was becoming one of those people who couldn't adapt. The doubt bothered me more than Clara's criticism. Then one morning I noticed several plants missing, not dead, gone. She had arranged for a landscaping crew to remove them. Without asking, I stood in the empty section of the garden staring at bare soil where years of memories had once grown. When Clara arrived later that afternoon, she seemed pleased with herself. "It'll look much better when we're finished." "We're not you, not your garden." Where for the first time I felt something colder than anger. I felt erased. Still, I didn't explode. I asked questions. Who authorized the work? Who hired the crew? What exactly had been planned? The answers came with surprising confidence. Clara had apparently assumed that because everyone appreciated the property, everyone had a say in redesigning it. Over the next week, I quietly gathered documents, brought property records, maintenance agreements. The approvals required by our residential community. I learned something Clara apparently hadn't. Significant exterior modifications required authorization from the homeowner's architectural review committee. No approval had been requested, no permission had been granted. The landscaping company had been working entirely on Clara's instructions. I submitted the information. Then I waited. The turning point arrived on a bright Tuesday morning. I was watering what remained of the roses when two representatives from the community association arrived. The landscaping crew happened to be there as well, so was Clara. The conversation was not loud. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting. That somehow made it more powerful. The representative reviewed the records, inspected the work, and explained the situation clearly. The modifications had not been authorized. The homeowner of record, me, had not approved the changes. Further work would stop immediately pending review. I remember Clara trying to explain, trying to frame everything as an improvement. The committee representative listened politely, then he repeated a simple sentence. "The property owner is the only person authorized to approve these changes." That was it. No speech, no humiliation, just a fact. A fact everyone present could hear. For months, Clara had behaved as though my preferences were obstacles to overcome. In less than a minute, an authority she could not dismiss clarified that those preferences were actually rights. The crew packed up before noon. The garden became quiet again. Not whole, just quiet. Some plants could not be replaced. 30 years leaves marks that new purchases cannot duplicate. Clara and I never had a dramatic argument afterward. In some ways, that would have been easier. Instead, we moved around each other carefully, more politely, more honestly. She stopped offering unsolicited improvements. I stopped pretending the problem had never existed. Our relationship survived, though altered. Trust, once disturbed, rarely returns to exactly the same shape. A few weeks later, I sat alone in the garden near sunset. The damaged sections were still visible, the gaps remained, yet new growth had already started appearing around the edges. I remember looking at those roses and realizing something. The garden had never been about flowers. The kitchen had never been about cabinets. They were evidence of a life I had built one decision at a time. What had frightened me wasn't change. It was the possibility of losing ownership of my own story. The roses swayed gently in the evening breeze. For the first time in months, nobody was telling me how they should look, and that silence felt like peace returning home.